Hello everybody and welcome back to Expedition Homestead. I hope you're all having a wonderful day and getting geared up for the springtime. I'm sure you guys are well aware that spring can be the busiest times of the year for gardeners because we have to plan out what sort of crops we're going to grow, where we're going to grow them, and how we're going to grow them as well. I've got some news for you. If you want to make sure that your garden is built on a strong foundation in order to make sure that you have the best harvest possible, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for this video. As I said in the intro, there's so many things to plan out when starting a garden. In today's video, we're going to talk about garden orientation and row orientation because, let's be honest, sun is obviously an extremely crucial part of the equation when growing plants and making sure that we have successful harvests to feed ourselves and our family and friends around us. If we don't plant our gardens in the correct orientation, we're just not going to have as good of a harvest, and we're going to have a lot of discrepancies in the plants that we're growing as well, because some will definitely not be getting the amount of light that they need in order to provide you guys with the food that you need. Thankfully, today's video is going to be very quick and simple for y'all who are looking for a quick tip on how to start your gardens out right. A couple things we're going to cover is where to place your garden beds and how to orient the rows in those beds. When looking for a good spot to place your garden, if you have not already yet done so, it's just to find basically a spot with the most sun possible, because we can always orient our garden placement later on, the rows, to cast shade on some of the plants that might need it if some vegetable plants need it. But for the most part, you're going to want as much sun as possible for your garden. Trust me, most vegetables will thrive in a sunny location and very few will thrive in a shady spot. And if you are in a town or a city, most likely you have more area in your backyard that is shaded than not. So find the sunniest location in your backyard. So you're going to want to check throughout the day, several hours throughout the day, to see which areas get the most sun. Because you might go out there at 12 o'clock and see that you've got sunlight throughout most of your yard, but then if you're out there at 2 o'clock, you can see that there is a giant shadow cast on in the entire half of your yard. So check throughout the day to find out the best location for your garden beds. This is going to be the sunniest one. Next up, we're going to look at orientation of our garden rows. If you think about the way the sun rises and sets from the east to the west, this is the direction that is going to cast the most shade on your plants. Not a lot of shadows will be cast from north to south or south to north, but most will be cast from east to west. So because of this, we want to orient our rows going from north to south. That way, as the sun rises over our garden bed, each row is going to get approximately the same amount of sunlight. And when we orient our rows like this, if you guys are growing in a raised garden bed, it is best to run the beds from east to west. That way we have our rows going the short distance across our beds. Otherwise, if you have long rows across a raised garden bed, I found that it's a little bit harder to get maybe the rows that are in the middle of the raised garden bed. So your garden bed will be running east to west, and your rows will be running from north to south. This is ideal for a small backyard gardener and is really a great way to maximize the sunlight getting to your plant. Like I said earlier, this is going to allow the most even distribution of sunlight throughout the rows of your garden. Granted, if you have a larger garden and simply don't have a choice but to run it a certain way, that's totally okay. But for the backyard gardener who has just a few beds, this is really going to be ideal. It's going to provide some great sunlight coverage, and it's going to be very easy for you guys to harvest your plants when it comes time. Another quick tip I want to give you guys is to think about the heights of the plants that you're growing and the plants that are going to be casting the most shade on the garden. Sweet corn, for instance. If you're growing sweet corn, you're going to want it on the furthest north point of your garden bed instead of south, because if it were south, it's going to be casting shade on the plants north of it throughout the day. You are going to subsequently get into shorter and smaller plants as you go south. So your leafy greens, for instance, or carrots, or radishes and beets, these are going to be the sort of crops that you're going to plant on the south beds that you have, or the south rows. And then the plants that you have that are very tall should be on the north end. Just a quick, easy tip for you guys, just to help you out when actually planning on where the crops are going to go in your garden. And I am going to cover that in a future video here coming up, hopefully this week, maybe this coming weekend, all about me planning my garden and where the crops are going. We're going to sit down together, write it all out on a graph and a piece of paper to show you guys my entire thought process on how I am going to plan out my garden this year. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. Comment if you have any questions. Of course, I will try to get to them. Otherwise, we have a great community of gardeners. So if any of you guys see some unanswered questions down below, feel free to try and give them the best advice that you have so we can all help each other out as a community. Happy gardening, and we'll see you in the next episode.